Everyone, you all get a gold medal because you made it to the end. You found your way here and you didn't melt on the process. So we're very excited to have a panel discussion on the topic you see behind me, exploring government, academic partnerships, and AI. And to help steer you through that conversation, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen. If you do have questions, raise your hand and I'll get the mic to you so that the people online can hear you. And if you're online, of which there are quite a few, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A section and I will read it to the panel. So without further ado, Eileen, it's all yours.
Awesome. So hello, thank you. It's the end of 3 really amazing days, so we appreciate this opportunity. My name is Eileen Vidrine. I have the honor to serve as the Senior Strategic Advisor for Data to the Federal CIO at the Office of Management and Budget in the Executive Office of the President, but I actually am a detailee from the Department of the Air Force. And my prior assignment was the CDO at the Department of the Air Force, which has 2 military services, Air and Space Force. And so I asked 2 of my colleagues, Major John Radovan and Dr. Rafael to come here today to talk about different models in how the government specifically is partnering with our academic institutions. So Rafael, can you introduce yourself a little bit to the team?
Yeah, I'm Dr. Rafael Fricks. I'm a PhD in biomedical engineering. I'm a supervisory computer engineer for the National Artificial Intelligence Institute, which is one of our central offices and a new office in the VA. I work for Director Gil Alterowitz, who's Director for AI at the VA, and I lead a couple initiatives that are based in research, data-based research, and public-private partnerships. That we have a couple initiatives to promote here today as well.
And John?
Awesome. My name is Major John Radovan. I'm the Deputy Director of the Department of the Air Force MIT Artificial Intelligence Accelerator. We stood up in June of 2019 under the direction of then Secretary Wilson and Vice Chief General Wilson. And so we're a relatively new unit. We're actually based here at MIT in CSAIL as a partnership. And so in my role, we oversee 15 dual-use AI projects that we work with MIT. I have a team of 12 airmen that are here at MIT that represent 9 different specialties, so intel, weather, pilots, and we embed those folks into the research teams. And we also partner with MIT Lincoln Laboratory to help us kind of with the applied side. And so 20 years in service, prior enlisted, and I'm a meteorologist by trade. Prior to this assignment, I did a year at Amazon for education with industry and went through their machine learning university.
So thank you both for joining us today. I'm going to start with you, Rafael. Why partner with academe, and how has this worked for your organization at the VA?
Well, and thank you for having us also, first of all. But for us, now, one of the programs that I lead is the AI Tech Sprint. We're actually announcing and taking applications for this sprint now. And the AI Tech Sprint's a good example of why we partner with academia and industry, that federal government agencies such as the Department of Veterans Affairs are huge producers of data. We have the largest integrated health system in the United States. We have something on the order of 10 billion medical images. And so we're good at producing the data through the course of our service. We have some of the top clinicians in our fields. However, we don't necessarily have product development expertise, and a lot of the companies and academics that we organize with bring a fresh perspective. So we offer challenge-based prizes using our data to develop new prototypes that we can pilot through our clinics into a novel medical device. And we look to promote the adoption of these technologies in clinical practice.
John?
I would say it's a proven model. I think this is something that we did, towards the end of World War II and through the Cold War. There was a strong partnership between the military and academia, and this is something that we've revisited here with the accelerator. And one of the main things that I think is helpful is that MIT covers our blind spot in a lot of ways that we think about technology. And so we have a lot of military experts that are functionally know their jobs really well. And so bringing them here on campus and interacting with the PIs and the grad students on the research side of the house really helps create better research. And so I would say the researchers enjoy having a functional expert there. And so this has been a phenomenal partnership that, again, like, it helps us cover these blind spots that we have in our thinking about artificial intelligence and different types of applications.
Well, and over the last few days, we've talked a lot about diversity of thought and reducing bias. And so I think it's interesting that both of you are working with academic partners that really, that brings in that component that I think is really elevated to the top. So I guess the next question I would ask is, there's a lot of strengths, but what are some of the challenges that you've experienced working with academia? And I'll start with you, John.
So I would say cultural. I think it's a cultural shock. Spent 20 years in the military and showing up on a campus at MIT with some of the brightest minds in the world. And so we've really enjoyed our time here, getting on the same kind of language and wavelength, if you will, on, one thing I've learned is in academia, words really matter. And so MIT has been very helpful in kind of correcting us on sometimes we're careless with the way we portray AI or use it. And so that's been one of the challenges, I think. The other being, I would call it a healthy tension that we have here. And so MIT helps us to think bigger about the problem. Lincoln Laboratories tells us what we could actually do kind of with our systems. And then the Air Force says, I want something now. And so I think it works really well from a challenge perspective. And so we welcome that healthy tension to kind of move through. But it's definitely a learning process and something that we've developed over the last 3 years in building up this relationship with the university.
I'm sure people are going to ask, do you wear your uniform on campus?
We do not.
So you blend in.
We do blend in, but I will say this. One of the interesting things is that is our connection with the grad students, because that's where the real magic is. The PIs are there and they're bringing their name to it, but a lot of the research being done that we work with is the grad students. And so it's been interesting working with a lot of the students that have never even been spoken to somebody in the military before. And we weren't sure how this was going to play out. We have an MQ-9 pilot that's here with us. And so are people going to be outraged? They call him baby killer or what's going to be? And it's actually been quite the opposite. Here at MIT, the students are really interactive and they want to know, hey, how do you guys think about this? And so it's been actually a great experience for us. And some of the PIs have actually asked us to reach out and sit with their students and give them a perspective that they've never seen on kind of how we think about things. So it's been great.
Rafael?
It's hard to sort of define a line really between the VA and academia in the sense that many of our top clinicians also have a joint affiliation with local universities. 75% of all healthcare providers in the United States do some form of training at VA facilities. And so I would say that really, one of our challenges is that is unique to our service is that as a covered entity, as a healthcare provider, we're governed by the HIPAA privacy rule, which dictates exactly how we should protect individuals' privacy. We can't be letting out veteran records wildly, and actually the VA has a higher standard than what is explicitly defined in the privacy rule. So oftentimes what the challenge has been recently is if we can de-identify data to a suitable standard to the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is a very high standard, or if we can furnace, I'm more of an engineering background, if we can really set up the computational environment within the VA's firewall that allows us to work with this treasure trove of data that we have in a way that's regulated by an institutional review board. And so that's how we tend to partner with academics and with researchers to try to develop models within our system. Now that's challenging in the context of deep learning because of the high requirements in terms of how much compute you need, how many GPUs, how many cloud credits you might have to use in that process. And so I would say lastly, our office is also looking at There is a fast track action committee, which is intra-agency right now, that will be producing recommendations by the end of the year on privacy-preserving data sharing and analytics technologies for the executive branch to enact, to hopefully have a few other means of working with collaborators without having to, risk the privacy of this data. And we have a few concerted efforts within the VA for the generation of realistic synthetic data so that it's representative of the underlying population without exposing any individual's protected information.
Great. So each of you have talked a little bit about, you have two different organizations, two different operating models, off-site, on-site, embedded, working remote. John, the Department of the Air Force made a conscious decision to embed airmen on-site here at MIT. What's the big strengths of that? What's the lessons learned? Where, is that something that's going to continue?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Eileen. I think, I'll quote one of our PIs, and he said this to me a couple of times. He says, John, your money is not life-changing. If I want more research money, I can go to DARPA and get 10 times the amount. He goes, the difference is you're my only sponsor who actually sits here with us and works with us on the research. He says, everybody else thinks we just give them money and then we'll give them answers. He goes, but you guys are here participating in the research. And I'll give you an example. We have an enlisted tech sergeant, actually just promoted him to master sergeant last week, and he's an intel analyst. And he works on synthetic aperture radar images, interpreting them. So we have a project that looks to take synthetic aperture radar images, which traditionally are hard to interpret, and put them into electro-optical images, which anybody can really look at using style GANs. And as he integrated with the research team, they're wondering which thrust to go towards on problems to solve. And they had 3 courses of action they were going to take, and they were going to go with a different one. And the guy's name is Armando Cabrera. He spoke up and he said, actually, this one right here is, if you could solve this problem, you unblock a lot of things for us. And they never realized from solving the problem that this was the actual problem to solve. And I think Professor Daniela Ruse, me and her were on a separate meeting earlier this morning. And one of the things she says is like, academia wants to solve problems, but sometimes they don't know which the right problem to solve. And so by bringing our folks into the research team, we're actually able to participate and say, hey, I know it may just be a data set to you as you're applying machine learning to it, but this is how, as an end user, I think about it, and this would really help me out. And so that's one of the ways I think is a benefit of actually taking somebody in. And we make sure that the folks that we bring here have operational experience. So a lot of times in the military, there are people that spend half their career just going to school and getting degrees. We go for folks that are operators coming straight out of the field to provide the ground truth on the problems that need to be solved, and then bring that to the research side of the house.
And I'm just thinking to myself, how awesome is it that you can have an enlisted troop mid-career, probably never thought the art of the possible that someday their career would involve being on a major academic campus, working with some of the top AI researchers on the planet.
Absolutely. I'll add is he's also the lead author on one of the papers that we're publishing right now from the SARDEO project, which is actually a big deal to be the lead author. And so a lot of our folks are co-authors on the paper, but Armando is actually published as a lead author. And so as a technical sergeant, it's just for any military, even for an officer, that would be a big deal.
I just still, because I started my leadership journey as an enlisted soldier, and so that's pretty awesome. So Rafael, the VA uses more of a scheduled engagement model. What's the strengths? How does that work? How does that work for you? And where are you going with that, your particular model?
Sure. Can you, clarify scheduled engagement in this
More,
context?
you don't have people embedded every single day.
Got it, yeah.
You, I think, more pick specific times and do that constant feedback loop. How often is it?
Right.
How does that work? How did that work post versus pre-COVID? I mean, has it changed? Because that feedback loop is really important to the research piece.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, this is kind of a long walk, but so going back to those questions of bias and inclusivity is that we want to ensure that the artificial intelligence technologies that are being developed for clinical diagnostic support are representative of the veteran population and work well on the veteran population. So that requires that we take as large of a collection of veteran medical data, for instance, as training examples or validation cases. So right now we don't have the capability to sort of summon that data immediately. It's still an active process where we collaborate with various medical institutions, different hospitals, people at various levels to collect this data through a process that was designed primarily to control access to that data to preserve its privacy. So when we are gearing up for instance, one of these AI tech sprints, which the idea is that we provide a snippet of federal data and articulate a problem and then work with teams across a 90-day period to develop a prototype for a solution. We have to do all this lead up in terms of collecting the data, labeling it, and anonymizing it as appropriate, and really curating the process. And that's why we tend to go with more of a scheduled approach of offering certain events. And we're always very happy to announce, like we have a tech sprint right now that people can apply for through challenge.gov, where we'll be looking to prototype a workforce management platform. We've had a few information sessions that I'm happy to share out to this audience.
Great.
And we're taking applications for that to work with us to develop this prototype that would be potentially an intra-agency platform used in the future for assessing and helping to educate our workforce.
I love it when we can crowdsource solutions. John knows that when in my role as CDO at the Department of the Air Force, one of the first things we did was a datathon to use the power of our workforce, and our most recent datathon actually included small business and a few others. And when we first said, you want to do what? And I said, we want to use our community to really help be part of the solution. And I think back to that very first datathon, that the solution is actually in production today, used by thousands of airmen every day. So there are some amazing collaborative opportunities to expand beyond the next group. And I know that academia actually participates in some of these datathons now too, which is pretty awesome. You guys are working on lots of projects right now. Probably, if you could highlight just one or two projects that you're really excited, you say, wow, we're working on X right now. What do you want to highlight?
Well, I would like to joke that I would like to have 3 days to talk about all these topics. And actually, we are planning right now a Brain Summit in Washington, D.C., which will be 3 days from September 7th through 9th, showcasing various ways in which the Department of Veterans Affairs is applying AI to core topics in brain health in our veteran population. So we have, I would say, about half of the presentations are dedicated to core topics in brain cancer, or more broadly, head and neck cancers. We also have a focus on brain injury and rehabilitation, especially TBI. The VA manages the most TBI cases of any hospital system in the world. And mental health is also a core component of the VA service, that we have various suicide prevention initiatives that are ongoing, and we're looking to apply, for instance, natural language processing for message triage with some of our pilots to be able to get to messages that come in from veterans at a priority. So all of these initiatives I'm mentioning are linked out through our primary website with the National AI National AI Institute, which is at research.va.gov/NAII. And so the summit is also going to cover data access policy, things I've been sort of brushing up here as well. Some of the computing infrastructure that's coming online at the VA, some of the collaborative opportunities, the AI tech sprints as well. And we do welcome people from government agencies, academia, industry, that there will actually be quite a few opportunities for exhibitors and speakers outside of the VA as well.
John?
So, there's so many. I'll stick to the SAR-EO project that we have. One of the neat things that we've been doing with that, and you know, we talk about dual use, and so you think about, I don't know if people remember when the bad earthquake in Haiti happened, and there's cloud cover, everyone's trying to figure out like, what roads are clear, what's there, and the application for that, because SAR can see through the weather. And if we could find a way to actually use that and then get an actionable EO shot that from the SAR to EO applying machine learning, you could just quickly think about being able to at least get a sense of this road is still good, this bridge isn't, this is destructive. And so I'm very excited about the practical application of being able to apply these things, because I think from a Hatter and a disaster relief is phenomenal. One of the neat things we did with this project is we actually recently in a call them military exercises, we actually tested out, we took the model that was developed here at MIT with Tech Sergeant Cabrera, and we actually put it up on a pod and actually built the data flow from an aircraft. And so think about digital payloads. And so it was flying. Again, Valiant Shields practices in the Pacific practices Hatter type stuff with other countries and stuff. And we actually flew it during the exercise and collected a whole bunch of data back. And so the ability to kind of take the research and immediately kind of test it out in the field, gather feedback, and then iterate again, I think that's really exciting. I will also mention our Earth Intelligence Engine project. I'm a meteorologist, so I'm a little, by trade, so I'm a little biased to that. But under that line of effort, we do our AI ethics kind of work, if you will. And so we do AI explainability, we do robustness, and we do few-shot learning. Because of the weather data set is so easily to go out there, and those three kind of will touch any application that we put out there. And so the robustness side is what I'm really excited about. The serious people within the building understand, when we talk about AI, understand the robustness piece. And right now, you know, AI is brittle in some senses. And so building robustness into our systems, I think from a national security perspective, is an absolutely must. And so the exciting work that we're doing there, again, on a weather project that we could easily move over to any other project out there or program, even to cross agencies and stuff, I think is really exciting for me to be able to do that work.
Awesome. So I'm looking at these two gentlemen, and the first thing I'm thinking is, how do I make sure I keep them in the public space? The digital talent, the war on talent is fierce. Industry's looking for folks. They love to look at these types of initiatives and permanently borrow is probably the nicest way I can put it. What investments are your organizations making to address training and education, upskilling, and really retention? Like, how do we keep you?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, you know, like I was brought into the VA partly because of the mission and the unique access to the data resources that we have. And that tends to go a long way in terms of lots of people who are at the VA are happy to be there and there for a purpose. But in addition, we do have a few people who ultimately get permanently borrowed at a very lucrative rate, and we're trying to keep up with that as well. In that our office has been working through, now this is sort of a drier internal policy thing, but attempting to open up, right now, physicians who work for the VA go through a different authority for hiring called Title V, I believe, that allows us to be competitive with doctor salaries. Now, that applies to medical doctors, not so much a PhD necessarily, but we are looking to find a similar HR mechanism for data scientists so that we can offer competitive salaries to catch and retain some of our best data scientists so that we can continue to develop this research. And I would add that, in addition to, I think it's an excellent place to work. There's great opportunities. There are different ways to collaborate. And we are also building out this Aspire platform. Aspire is the cross-agency educational platform that is being led by one of my colleagues, Tony Bosey, out of our office, where the intention is that we are developing a system for assessing core competencies and for individuals then to recommend a tailored approach to build on certain skills, whether it be, for instance, computer vision or natural language processing. So we can assess that person's capabilities, offer a way for them to advance. And meanwhile, it serves a dual purpose, and this has been of high interest, I would say, to other departments, that they can now also have a picture of, where are their strengths and weaknesses, where might they need contractor support, for instance, or where do they need to have a targeted hiring push to, shore up a deficiency in our workforce if we don't have a lot of accountants, per se. So our next tech sprint is on prototyping the first stage of that educational platform. And so that's something we're looking for industry partners to help us build an education platform for assessing talent, providing personalized training pathways. And that's the posting that we have on challenge.gov and the information sessions that have been previously recorded.
I got 3 job offers yesterday.
Don't tell me that.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Internally, we have this conversation a lot on retention of talent. And there are many different ways I can go about this. I think for our unit here at the accelerator, one of the unique things here is we don't, when we stood up the unit, and I was one of the founding members to kind of stand up the accelerator, is we didn't make folks take a service commitment to come here to MIT. Normally, for these types of assignments, we said, you can come to MIT and work at the accelerator, but you owe us 3 years. And I remember bringing this up to senior leadership when they're thinking about doing it. And I said, no one's going to come here if you're going to force this on them. I was like, we need to not have a service commitment so that we're forced to take care of these people and fight to keep them in the military. And so we've done a really good job of that with our unit and kind of saying we're not going to play the shell game. There are some uses for doing a service commitment, but for our talent, the pool that I have of the airmen here and the Guardians and the Space Force are some of the top talent in the military, and we make sure that we're going to go ahead and take care of them. I think, on an education standpoint, this is something that I think 2 months into standing up the unit, I remember telling the former director, Colonel Laz Gordon, and saying, Laz, we can't have any meaningful conversations with anybody because they just don't understand this particular technology. And so we got into education. We stood up a research project, an AI education research project. Dr. Cynthia Brazil is the PI. She's the digital dean at MIT. She's with the Media Lab. She's phenomenal. And what we're doing is we are studying military pedagogy when it comes to AI and how we learn. And so what we do is we build out learning journeys, and then we study them as they're going through. And we're actually publishing 2 papers this summer on our initial findings. And so what we're trying to do is democratize AI from an educational standpoint to the workforce. We are very close, hopefully next month, it's not on contract yet, but opening up significant AI education resources to the entire DoD. That's pioneered out of our group here of some of the research that we've done. And so how do we retain talent? We provide folks access. And so this may be a little controversial, but this is how I feel about it, is that not everybody is going to stay in the military for 20 years. And so if I can bring somebody in and they serve 6 or 8 years, but they get some type of, emerging technology, artificial intelligence training, maybe they do a tour up here. When they go back into society, they're better than they were, and they're probably going to be contributing at some point, to the country or with a company. And so we work very hard on making sure that we take care of our folks. We've also started to internally track, and so we started these special experience identifiers so folks that go through our training, they now get this identifier in their record that says you went through here. And so now we can, before this, we have no ability to track who does anything when it comes to emerging tech. And so now we're able to start tracking these folks. And that's part of the HR process, is that the airmen and the guardians in this space, they want to work on hard problems, and they don't want to, go through a coding boot camp and learn Python and work here on research and do cutting edge stuff and then get thrown back in the hopper and work at a regular job. There's nothing wrong with that regular job, but now that we could track these folks, we're hoping to be able to move them around to key positions so that we can kind of retain that talent and the folks that like doing it. And we've had folks from dental assistants that are senior airmen that are building out toy computer vision models. Like, there's a lot of talent that's just not unearthed. And so we're trying to find that talent, make sure that we identify it, and then provide places that they can go so that we can retain them.
Can I add to that answer, actually, as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one detail I remembered is that, for instance, I came up through the BD STEP data science postdoctoral fellowship program that the Department of Veterans Affairs has. But for someone who's looking to publish research and, considering an academic route, I would say that the National AI Institute is announcing, I think, 14 different data science positions. That these are, they're very good permanent positions, but they are phenomenal if you take it from the perspective of somebody who is, continuing to build their research portfolio, needs access to a research environment with data, computational resources, and so on, and looking to really continue to contribute to medical research and potentially, pursue their own appointment at some point. That I think it's an excellent opportunity to continue to build your way into medical research, working with an organization that's been at the forefront of medical research for many years. So I think it's very competitive when you look at it compared to even a postdoctoral fellowship.
And these gentlemen both know that I'm pretty passionate about interns. Many federal agencies today actually bring in paid interns, not just for summer, but throughout the academic year. And so I always mention that because you may have a family member, neighbor that is really looking to do something great and contribute to the mission. It gives them an opportunity to see if they fit in the federal space. And I would say that it's not just in the Department of Veterans Affairs or at the Office of Management and Budget or the Department of the Air Force. Most federal agencies now have these programs. For a while they kind of lulled, but they're back in force. And I think that's a great news story because it's a win-win that people can it's a test drive. And I know that the first data scientist that I brought in to my team in the Department of the Air Force became a permanent civilian. And then the next year he was the top civilian in his labor category in the department headquarters, which was pretty awesome. And so there are amazing opportunities for people to look at in the federal space, both. And I would also I would include the FFRDCs, the federally funded research and development organizations there. So that's another way that we can partner with academe to create that next pipeline, not just on research, but actually bringing in workforce, which I think is a pretty awesome component. So there's a presidential executive order on promoting the use of trustworthy AI in federal government, and there's several deliverables. Okay, one of the deliverables that the federal CIO, the office that I work and I support for, will near term be releasing the initial AI inventory. What's the next big thing coming on your organization? I know you have this conference, but I know you're looking even beyond that. What's on the horizon that we should be thinking about?
Well, definitely regarding the executive order, that was something that our director, Dr. Gil Alterowitz, and a couple of us in the office had quite a bit of input into the executive branch about what makes sense in this context. And it's something that the National AI Institute, as the premier AI organization within the VA, publishes our VA AI strategy that incorporates these trustworthy AI principles, and that's really the best place to get the full definitions of, we're looking for technologies that are interpretable, that are inclusive, that are developed with controlling bias in mind. And so we're applying these principles now in every development, whether it's one of these AI tech sprints that what I'm looking to do with my background more in medical imaging is in addition to the Brain Summit, where we'll be talking a lot of imaging about a lot of specialties that are heavy in imaging, we are looking to provide more repositories of information and base future challenges around identification problems in these images. So for example, if we're talking about lung nodules, so potential signs of lung cancer, that sort of thing, technologies have been very mature for a while in terms of being able to identify, assess, and even segment lung nodules in traditional CT imaging. So one of the things we're looking to do going forward is to vet new technologies through a challenge-based mechanism, but then also start to employ that in the Department of Veterans Affairs, because many people don't know, but the VA led the way in digitization of medical imaging, and that was one of the key developments that has helped artificial intelligence be developed by collecting all these digital images that are machine readable. And so we want to also lead the way in terms of verifying and defining how these should be incorporated in practice.
Thank you. John?
So I think on the responsible AI piece, MIT, I think I mentioned it before, they help cover our blind spot in the way we think about technology and how to use it. I mean, obviously, a lot of folks don't realize how regulated the military is on just about anything we want to do. It's not like the movies where one person is making a decision. You want to do something, there's a lawyer there, there's laws, and so we're very regulated. We have, I think, every 2 months as a collective, so within the accelerator, we have 186 MIT PIs, grad students, Lincoln Laboratory staff that works with us. And so every Friday, we do these deep dives into different problems. But every other month, we also do a check-in on ethics and AI and different ways to think about it as a community. And so it's probably one of the best meetings that we have. It's an open discussion amongst the community. And so you have, operators from the military side of the house and how we're thinking. You have the PIs, the researchers, Lincoln Laboratory. And so we make that as part of the very fabric as we're thinking about everything that we're doing in our development side. From an ethical, AI standpoint, we're definitely looking at that. One of the if you're asking like the neat things on the horizon that we're excited about, one of our projects is using, it's called MagNav, magnetic navigation. And so being able to use the Earth's magnetic field to navigate without a GPS or satellite. And so it's a really neat space. It's a hard problem to solve. We've been building out data sets. We really recently ran a challenge. And so these are one of these kind of, I don't know if the right word is moonshot, but big things that can really change a lot of things on the civilian side and the military side. So that's one of the projects. Really excited to kind of see what's going to come out of this in a couple of years.
So I'm going to ask, do we have any questions?
Thanks for your exceptional sharing and talk, and thank you for your service and your pioneering work. So I'm a civil servant, an independent federal agency. So I'm going to ask about process. What sort of vehicle do you have? Can other agencies join that vehicle? What's the term of engagement? If a staff member want to come up for that 3 months or 6 months, and how does that work?
So we actually have a program that addresses that. We call it the Phantom Program. And we started that probably a year ago, started prototyping it out. We're up to 15 folks that we bring in on a 4-month basis. Right now, they're all uniformed and civilian personnel from different agencies. There's an application process. I think our new cohort starts in August. The Navy is actually sending us 2 folks in the August one. And then we're having participation. I can't name the agency, but has come in and wants to go do that. And so from an engagement standpoint, we're not trying to empire build the accelerator. If you think accelerator in terms of like building fires, accelerators just start. They're not the ones that keep, the fire burning. And so our value proposition, how we measure success is how we come along to other agencies and other organizations to help them out. And so we actually have an established program. We have folks from individual bases that are on loan to us. And so we work with a lot of organizations to do that. And so, you can get my contact information, and we're very open to collaborating. We love having diversity and other folks coming in with different perspectives and problems to help us, again, cover blind spots and think of challenges in new ways. And so that's something that we're very open to within the accelerator.
And I would probably follow up that if we don't find the vehicle immediately, I think that right now I'm detailed in the federal CIO. We can ask our CIO colleagues as well as our CDO colleagues across the federal space, because I think we've been really good about trying to make vehicles open as possible so that you don't have to start all over again. You can use somebody else's great work as a springboard to move your work forward.
I'm not on Michael. This is embedded within CSAIL.
So this is embedded within the Department of the Air Force side. And so what we do, we're an Air Force unit that we're in a cooperative agreement with MIT as a whole. The CSAIL director, Professor Daniela Roos, is the MIT director, and then we have Colonel Floyd, who is the Air Force director. And so we have an agreement with MIT that we sponsor folks into our organization and bring them in, but it's not through the MIT door, it's through the Air Force door.
I should mention from my perspective, I joined the National AI Institute, we call it the NI. I joined the NI relatively early, about 2 years ago, and at the time there were maybe 5 or 6 people, but nowadays I lost count, we're at about 30. And the main ways that we get other people to join, we've used a number of different mechanisms and been very creative. In addition to opening permanent positions like the data scientist and research coordinator roles we're now hiring for, we've also had a lot of federal agents who have detailed over to us. And so we support a number of details. We have Presidential Innovation Fellows, Presidential Management Fellows. We have a number of IPAs, interpersonnel agreements, that we extend to certain faculty. And, and then there's also, you can work with us in a less formal capacity, like either by coming out to the summit and joining a collaboration, or through the sprint is how we tend to work with industry folks, and just a number of different mechanisms that tend to happen case by case.
And I think that one of the points is Presidential Innovation Fellows. They are sponsored by a home agency, but part of their portfolio allows them to work 20% supporting a project of their choice. So GSA manages, General Service Administration manages all of the PIFs, Presidential Innovation Fellows, but there could be a fellow that there could be a perfect fit based on your mission. And
our director was a PIF when he founded the Institute, so that was one outcome of that. It's a very effective program, I would say.
So I have a question. Part Tikiwala, Office of the Federal CIO, OMB. I work with Eileen on the data team there for our Federal CIO. Your question, sir, goes right into what we're actually experiencing on a day-to-day basis within OFCIO. I'm borrowing Eileen's words here, but you move at the pace of the mission, and you deliver at the pace of mission, right? And having said that, when you have these kinds of openness in kind of hiring in different avenues, you actually make momentum happen. And we have PIFs, we have White House Leadership Development Fellows, but moving to my kind of question related to this, you guys have diversity within the AI space, obviously. That's because of mission, that's because of agency, that's because of the background, the data itself. If at our level, within the OSTP, White House, OMB, Federal CIO level, what are 3 touch points that in this space, maybe there's some connectivity across silos here within the AI space that you guys can speak on? If there was a magic pen, let's say, for what downward pressure you would want for guidance in this space. That could go up as well. It's a loaded question, but it's a discussion anyway. Thanks.
I'm parsing that question. So how would, like, for instance, we collaborate intra-agency in AI, or?
Right, and what kind of guidance would you want from the top, knowing what you guys have done so far? Would maybe say a lack of guidance or maybe not enough?
No. That's kind of like it. Well, so in addition to, I would say we are heavily involved in informing policy, like through whether it's recommendations that eventually become part of the executive order, or the like fast track action committee recommendations that come through research and process. But I would say that we provide policy guidance working with intra-agency, and this is all part of a broader initiative called the National AI Initiative, which has the same acronym, but that's a intra-agency program that was established, I think, through the NDAA 2021. And so now we have a website set up at ai.gov that defines what are the core offices in each organization for AI, and these offices, we set AI policy for VA, but we broadly work with these other offices to make sure that the AI policy is harmonized, and that's a collaboration. Like, we get ideas from them, we propose ideas, and through different committees, then we make sure that we're putting forth the best ideas in terms of how federal government should leverage AI, how we should assess, potential biases that might be developed down the line. But that's farther out in policy than I'm typically involved in, although I do have some technical recommendations in those categories.
So I'm retirement eligible, so I'll speak freely. If I were king for a day, I would require all the way down every program to provide a training quality data set of any data that they're bringing in, whether it's personal data, whether it's sensor data, kind of an internal GitHub, if you will, maybe on the Vault, that resides up there so that we actually know what is there. Because right now we make a lot of assumptions on, I'm going to take all of this data, do some AI, and then I get this output. But the output is just a guess because we don't actually have these training quality data sets there to actually see if that data is good enough to go. And so that I would love if somebody from the top would say, you are required now, and make that an edict. The other thing would be, in the NDAA last year was published, and I can't remember the exact number, but it's a computer language initiative where we start treating computer language like we do human language. So in the military, if you know a foreign language, they pay you a certain amount of money, and it's incentivized to be able to stay fluent in that language. The same thing is for the computer language initiative. And so we aren't actively tracking folks that are fluent in Python or R or some other language that's out, computer language. And there hasn't been a lot of movement on it, and I don't know how serious folks are. But when we talk about retention and keeping people in, that's an incentivize that we can do right now. It's in the NDAA, it's law. How we actually implement it is another way. And so that's what I would like from the top, is somebody to say, get serious about this. And that's something I would like. So those are the two kind of things.
I should mention Aspire, which is the All Services Personnel something education project, is intending to assess programming languages, as you have said, to eventually incorporate that as a plus up, essentially. And further, the VA has a data GitHub, which is at data.va.gov. It's part of our VA Open Data Portal, which is under the CDO's office. Now, as I mentioned before, though, because of privacy concerns, we have very tight statutes on both ends in terms of we are mandated to share data. Our office has recommended policies to tag data in metadata tags, for instance, if it's machine readable, if it's just summary statistics and so on. But on the other hand, in the interest of privacy, I would say the majority of data there is either synthetic or summary statistics, or, for instance, locations of various VBA services. But we do have that portal, which is something that we're intending to use going forward for sharing some projects that we can de-identify.
Have you run into considerations regarding intellectual property if you have a really great breakthrough, and how are you handling those on both sides?
So our most important member of our team is Major Andy Bone. He's our resident IP lawyer. And so we are a very unique organization in that a 12-person organization, one of the members has a dedicated lawyer, military lawyer that's there. And so IP is the name of the game. And in academia, we have to be reasonable on what we're asking. And so when we do public challenges where we put out an Air Force data set, and then MIT helps us run an AI challenge on it. And so we have data limitation rights on the data that we put out there. And so, if you talk to the lawyer, he'll say everything's on a case-by-case basis, and that's true. But bringing in the legal side early and having these frank discussions, because especially as things become more digital, some people will say, we're moving from an industrial military to a digital military, as an analogy. We can't ask for everything because some companies just won't work with us because we don't understand what that space is. And so having our lawyer here, working with MIT, working with other lawyers on the outside, and so we have somebody full-time that works that, and it's kept us out of a lot of trouble, but also opened up relationships, because now we can actually talk to company X or the university or the PIs that maybe want to do a startup, and it's reasonable on both sides of the house. And so, without Andy, we would be a mess. We'd probably be in trouble. And so, got to have that lawyer there.
We have looked at and employed to varying degrees license agreements with some of our data sets in the past. I would say that, for participation in the tech sprint, we typically have a very light license agreement that typically it's just a prototype that's developed in that phase. But we, especially from the tech sprint, we often selectively go to certain pilots based on very impressive prototypes that have an immediate use. And when we get into a piloting phase, that's when we devote a lot of contracting effort, significant expense, and we're really looking to set some of these prototypes that were developed in an external context into potentially prospective clinical trials. Like we're employing novel software for physical therapy, for instance, to integrate wearable sensor data and provide targeted recommendations for individuals. So usually when we're entering that contract, then it becomes more of a negotiation of, we would like to work with this company to develop and test the product, and they're welcome to profit from it, but just, we want sort of favorable terms and some involvement throughout that process, and that tends to be a negotiation with our technology acquisitions office. and a lot of contracting officials we have on our side as well.
One thing I want to add is that to the IP question is it's a very complicated space. AI is essentially software, right? And the difference with AI is the data writes the software. And so if you're taking my data set and your off-the-shelf, model or algorithm, and it changes. And so it's not a very clear-cut space. And I think, this is a hard problem to solve. And having an open discussion like we do on campus and having a resident expert to make these engagements, I think is very important because this is a very gray area when you get into the IP space. And I think if you put 10 lawyers in the room, you'd get 10 different answers. And so I think the AI space is very nuanced. And so when I said words matter, they do. And so having the right expertise and the people there engaging and working side by side so it doesn't seem like it's one-sided and we're listening to both parties. But this is a very hot topic and not easily solved. And I think the government needs to understand that it's not as clear-cut as they think.
In the medical space, FDA has a term of art of software as a medical device, which is the approach they're taking to regulating AI to be used for clinical applications. And so anybody with experience in developing medical devices, it can be a 10-year process from bench to an approved device. And it's evolving regulation that we're trying to understand, how should a algorithm be certified? What are the indications for use of that algorithm, as we have with any other medical technology? And that's something that also we want to monitor how they continue to evolve in the field, especially if we're going to consider online training, for instance, where the parameters are updated occasionally to combat drift of performance.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Last question.
Sorry, I'm a bit late, but I just wanted to know if you have any successful projects that maybe you can walk us through that was successful. I mean, I'm from the MIT side, so I wonder how you guys see a successful project from your side.
Sure. So I assume maybe you're talking transition, which is, we have a term, the valley of death, because it's not easy. But what our research projects, and I know we're short on time, and so part of the criteria for selecting the problems that we were going to go after is we required, one, the Air Force unit that was sponsoring this problem to provide data. And so if you don't know Dr. Neil Lawrence, he used to be the head of machine learning for Amazon. He coined this idea of data readiness levels, which I love. And so a lot of data is like hearsay data, and we can't have that. We need actual data that's there. And so the organization had to have good machine learning data available, and then they also had to have a program office that was willing to transition this over and saw that this was something that they could actually use. And so we just now, with our Earth Intelligence project, worked with the program office, and we focused research on an existing AI application, and we did a proof of concept. We built out a prototype. And then now we're working with the prime contractor in Lincoln Laboratory, and we're transitioning that to the prime, which then will make it up to the operational side. And so that's kind of the approach that we have. It's very hard to do, but that's one of the successful things I think that we could point to from an actual transition side of the house.
So I have a story on this one as well, that, through the AI tech sprint process, we're scouting for new technologies. And I would say that the unique parts of the VA is we're like the post office. We have to serve every part of the country, and veterans are free to live wherever they would like. So we've invested a lot of effort into telemedicine technologies for these rural veterans who are not close to a tier 1 medical center. And so one of the first examples, actually, it was the team that won the first AI tech sprint was a team startup out of California called Cure a Patient, where their innovation was, it was a technology for ensuring that veterans have better access to their medical records, to their physician, their team of physicians, I should say, and that they're adhering to their treatment protocols, even if those change or may be complicated. So one big cause of problems is when a patient doesn't adhere to their medication schedule. They're not taking the right pills at the right time. So the Cure Patient app, which is phone-based, allows a patient to take their phone, point it at the pills in their hand, and it uses computer vision along with a database of pharmaceuticals to identify the medications, make sure that they're holding the right ones and that they take the right ones. They can exchange messages with their provider. And this is one of the earliest projects that came out of the tech sprint, which is now being licensed by the VA. We'll be using it now to reach more veterans. I would say that there are about a dozen or so projects that are going through piloting phases that are on track to do that as well, but that's the one that's gotten the furthest so far in terms of contracting and so on. But these are the kinds of developments. Now, Cure Patient does more than just the registration of medication, making sure that they're taking them correctly. But we have information abound about all these different innovations, and I could talk all day about projects, so I would encourage you to go to our summit if you'd like to hear more about what we're doing.
Well, I'd like to thank both of these gentlemen for coming and sharing their experience. I'd also like to thank all of you for hanging in there on day 3, not just down to the minute, we're actually +2. So, and also thanked for all the people online that have hung in there with us virtually. Thank you.